Welcome back, Iron.
I'm in such a good mood, kind of.
It's
O'Hagan. Complicated.
And today,
My step-grandfather only
we
saying
are
it
going
to
to
explain.
talk about an
Wait, I
unresolved
too.
mystery.
No, he's my step-great-grandfather. No, he's my step-grandfather. It doesn't really
Let's
matter. He's my stepdad's dad, but I
let's-
love him like he's family. We butt heads like everyone else. But he just gave me his old iPad because he went to the
Ew.
Apple store a few days ago and bought a new one.
Yep.
Yes, I'm happy about a used iPad.
Oh.
It tells you a lot about me, doesn't it? But also, it has 64 gigs, and my iPad that I have right now has 8, which is basically nothing. Yeah. And I don't know if it has pen capabilities or not.
So today's unresolved mystery is UFOs.
Yeah. If I ever could own like a new iPad, I think I would want it to have pen capabilities.
UFOs and aliens.
Or just an Apple laptop, I don't know.
Well, the tale of
I really don't know at this point.
of
But I'm
identified
also trying to
flying
test to see if
objects
this video is
have
working because my sound on my
engaged
computer is
people
not working.
for
Or it
centuries.
wasn't working with
The
my
first
headphones
modern
on,
day
which is a whole
sighting
nother
did not
conversation.
occur until
That's just like,
1947.
really now?
When businessman
Why didn't I
Kenneth
bring the iPads to
Arnold
show you? Because I was
reported
probably going to show you on
seeing
another
objects flying
app.
at high speeds near Mount
Sharks, tigers,
Renan
Oh,
in
these are
Washington
some of the
State.
things I
Just
can do
1
when
month
I
later,
forget, like,
the infamous Roswell identified
done.
took place. Incident
So-
took place, surrounding the alarm that there may be
Ooh,
life
something that can really
on
test.
other planets and that
No, I'll
space
test one.
inhabitants have
Alexa,
visited
stop. It must be 6 o'clock, but I already did my 6 o'clock tour.
Roswell,
Which is giving me
one
cat
world.
treats. Okay, so today is
Foreman.
not before, but
Question: the most famous
forgot it was there.
UFO claim in history
Okay.
has been
Thursday,
extensively
January
researched and
2024,
debunked, but
Gone
UFO
Walkies. I got you a
unsolved
new
are
snack
still
at the
highly
store.
suspicious of
Yay,
what
I
went down
can't
in
wait till
New
you
Mexico
get home.
in 1947.
It's like bacon, but without the meat and half the fat. And 80%
In July
less,
1947,
85% less salt. It's
resident
called
of
bacon.
Roswell,
Never
New
come
Mexico,
home again.
stepped outside to fetch the morning newspaper only to read
My dog knows
what
I'm a
seemed like
vegetarian by now.
an
And I say that because every
unmanageable
time she's
and
around me,
possible
she looks at me for meat and then she
starflight
looks
candle
very
on
confused
the
when there
front
is none.
page.
And she gave up
RAAF
a
captures
while ago.
flying
My cat's
saucer
like,
on
she
ranch
picked
in
cheese
Roswell
though.
region.
No meat with this cheese.
In the story,
But
they
cheese.
learned that
Don't
former
forget to take out
William
your trash cans.
Mack
Okay, Alexa, stop. That is a
bizarrely
typical
had stumbled upon unexplained
trash can
debris,
day. No, let's check this one out.
including
Friday,
tinfoil,
January
rubber, and paper
2024.
on his
I'm
sheep
turning the food
pasture
blender
days
on.
earlier.
I'm telling
After
you because I know you hate the noise.
bizarrely
Are you
got
ready?
in
I was
contact with
born
the Roswell
ready.
Army Air Force about
Okay,
his
turning
findings.
it
The
on
soldiers
now.
came to
Death-
his ranch to
death
collect
has
the
come upon
particles.
The
The
wind buzzing of
RAAF
the
later
devil's
issued a
horde
press
is
release
rising to drag us
announcing that
down
it
to the
was
hill.
fortunate enough to
I said
gain
hill.
possession of a
Get what I'm
flying
saying.
disc.
And it's off.
But
Why?
later that
I was
week,
totally
an Air
fine.
Force official
Okay, turning it back on now.
clarified that the
Get
debris
me
came
back,
from a weather balloon that
Satan.
had crashed. The story quickly faded into obscurity until 1978, when
My dog
nuclear
is half British, half Mexican, and half
physicist
Albanian.
Stanton T.
Which
Freeman
accent would she have? A British
interviewed
one? Ooh,
RAAF
6 and 7.
Major Jeff
Saturday,
Markeel
January
Jr.,
2024.
who
It's
had
about
handled the debris in the 1980s
How
book
much
The
does it
Roswell
cost to take
Incident,
care of
for
a
which
dog like
Friedman
me? Financially
conducted
or emotionally?
research.
Financially. About $10 a week.
Markeel
Okay, what's the
described the
emotional cost?
padlock
Every
as
single
nothing made
emotion,
on
every
this earth.
single day.
The book's author,
I would love
Charles
to see what a cat
and
would
William
be.
Lee
These
Moore,
are hilarious.
meanwhile
My
introduced the
dog
theory
is
that
not that
Markeel
like snippy.
had
I feel like these would be
tampered
more my
with the
cat
debris,
Kevin
part of the
Butterscotch.
government cover-up
He is such a
involving
spicy little thing.
extraterrestrials.
Little,
A number
big
of
thing.
books
He's
followed,
15.5 pounds.
including Kevin
little.
D.
My
Ronald
dog's little.
and Ronald
My dog
R.
could fit into
Smith,
a
UFO
cat
crash at Roswell, 1991.
Okay, I'm
and
gonna
its
say bye and see if
1994
this video
sequel, The
works.
Truth About the UFO Crash at Roswell, which claimed that alien crops had been taken from the crash site by plane to be viewed by President Darwin D. Eisenhower. Wow, these are weird names. As conflicting reports continued to arise, the U.S. government ordered the security of the Air Force to investigate. In its first report in 1994, the Air Force conducted that the debris likely came from Project Muggle, a once converted operation that had employed high utility balloons equipment with microphones to monitor the Soviet government as it tested an automatic bomb. Roger, a retired official at the Sanitary National Air Force and Space Museum, explained to History.com in 2019 that a UFO had been a useful cover story for the Air Force at the time. A second Air Force report released in 1997 explained that the alleged alien body were exactly dummies that had been used by the military during 1950s to test ways for pilots to survive high falls. See, the thing is, they said that aliens are real recently in the couple of years, so I don't know. And yet UFOs pronounced have remained steadfast in the beliefs that a flying saucer crashed in Roswell and was covered up by the government. In a June 2016 interview with Jimmy Kimmel, President Barack Obama joked with the talk show host that the aliens exercised strict control over us. He then ended the questioning about Roswell with, "I can't really say anything." And arguably the most mysterious Air Force facility in the U.S., Area 51, has been the subject of UFO folklore for decades. The base, located at Groom Lake in southern Nevada, has been in use since 1955, but the CIA did not publicly confirm its existence until 2013. While locals have reported seeing UFOs in the area as far back as the mid to late 1950s, the crafts are likely secret spy planes being tested by armed men at Area 51. Others have gone so far as to basically sculpturate that the facility stores and studies UFOs in addition to holding meetings with aliens. Barney and Betty Hill's abduction. The New Hampshire-based couple became synonymous with UFO sightings after their alleged encounter in 1961. I have no idea what some of that meant, but we're just going to read it. As an international couple in the U.S. in the 1960s, Barney and Betty Hill were already pioneers, and then they became the first people to report being abducted by aliens. The Hills were driving back to their New Hampshire home, following a trip to Niagara Falls, and returned early in September 1961 when they saw a light moving in the sky. As it continued to get bigger, Betty, 42, told Barney, 39, to pull over so they could get a closer look. Yeah, don't do that. Just keep driving. She pulled out binoculars and observed what she thought was a flying saucer, something her sister had seen in the past. Betty then passed the binoculars to Barney, who saw the object moving toward them at a fast pace. He and his wife rushed back to their car and drove away. Along the ride home, the Hills kept an eye on the large craft. Then, in the middle of the highway, it began hovering above their car. Barney, who worked for the U.S. Postal Service, stepped out of the vehicle, this time seeing nearly a dozen human-like figures looking out of the window of the flying object. The beings, which he later described as somehow not human, wore matching black outfits with hats. A frazzled Barney got back in the car and sped away as foreigner sounds vibrate off the truck, leaving circular marks on it. Before they knew it, Barney and Betty dazed and confused, realized they had traveled about 35 miles, though they had little recollection of the drive. They went into their house and saw the leather strap on their binoculars were torn. Barney's shoes were scraped and Betty's dress was ripped. The social worker claimed that 10 days after the incident, she began having dreams about being abducted by aliens from the Zeta Vehicle System. The National Investigation Committee on Aerial Phenomena interviewed the Hills at November and found that their drive home took 7 hours when it should have only taken 4, leaving 3 hours of unexplained missing time. The couple shared their story with an Air Force captain who visited their church and spoke to other churchgoers. They also separately met with hypnotics Benjamin Simon several times in 1964. After sessions, Simon concluded that Betty telling Barney about her bizarre dream had likely caused Barney to have a psychological episode. The Hills continued to work with Simon in the years that followed, as author John G. Fuller interviewed them for his 1966 book, The Interrupted Journey. Below left. Their story was also made into a TV movie in 1975 after Barney died of a cerebral hemorrhage in 1969, and Betty lost her battle with cancer in 2004. Her alma mater, University of New Hampshire, received her journal, which detailed Betty's dreams, photos, audio recordings, and the dress she wore that night of the incident. The items are displayed at the school's library. Nearly 60 years after the Hills' allegedly abduction, mixed martial artist Angela Hill publicly revealed that she is their granddaughter. When I was in art school, I did a whole documentary about it. Hill, who is the first black woman in the USC, said on the Hard Times podcast in June 2020, "I went to Philly, where all my dad's family is, and talked to all the close relatives about my grandfather. They all believed it. My other grandmother is the only one who's like him and that, which are crazy." There is so much about UFOs and ghosts in the back of this book. I'm actually surprised. I was not expecting that. After an apparent external spacecraft flew over Texas in 1980, those who saw it claimed they became violently ill in a matter of hours. Betty Chase and her friend Vicky took Landrum's 7-year-old grandson Colby out to dinner in December 1980, but what seemed like just another night in Dayton, Texas, turned into an experience they would never forget. On the car ride home, the trio saw what they thought was an airplane flying toward Houston. As they got closer, however, they realized it was a bright diamond-shaped object. It was emanating heat from its base, and flames shot out every so often. Landon told her grandson they were witnessing the second coming of Christ. The women go out of the car for a closer look, but the heat was unbearable. Eventually, the object began to fly away, but then the witnesses saw 23 helicopters surrounding it. After getting home that night, all three said they experienced vomiting and diarrhea and felt sunburn. Crash was later hospitalized with large blisters on her face, back and neck, and unexplained hair loss. Landrum claimed she had similar burns and developed cataracts from looking at the aircraft. The woman sued the U.S. government for $20 million, but their case was dismissed in 1986, despite Lt. Col. George Stanton of the Department of the Army Inspector General stating that Landrum and Crash were credible and were a Police and his wife, who claimed to have seen 12 helicopters near the U.S. site on the same day, there was no precipitation that anyone was trying to exterminate the truth. And welcome back. I am your host, the Susan Anna May O'Hagan, and today we have some true crime stories, and we are going to talk about them. If I've already said these stories, I'm sorry, there's just so many. Ooh, Biggie. I don't know if I'm ready to talk about Biggie. There's so much into Biggie and Tupac that I just don't know if I can handle that one yet. Like, there is a lot. Okay, teen lifeguard unsolved murder, new clues decades later. I think we already talked about that one. Molly Bush. Me, that's why it's on Biggie. Cold case. The Caddy Cabin murders. Yes. The Cry in the Night. Yup. Okay, so might be just on Biggie because that's the only one I have left. The Zodiac Killer. Who killed Hogan's hero? Judgment Day for a Predator. Golden State Killer. Yeah, okay. That's why it's on Biggie, because we already finished this one. I just not prepared for Biggie. I feel like I need to listen to his music, read Tupac's case, his case, and then get into it. I have another magazine here because I use them to help me, and I've also seen some of these on YouTube, or I will talk about some that I've heard about from other cases. The Body in the Backyard. Okay. Michelle Shavard became, whenever he talked about his 4-year-old son and 6-year-old daughter, after Michelle had kids, that's all he talked about, says Savor former co-worker and friend Michael Rippey. They were his biggest priority. S loved playing horseshoe with them and tending to the rabbit hutch he built for them in the backyard. He gave up his career as a commercial pilot, because it took him away from home too much, and took a job as a mechanic fixing the monorail at Disney World. And friends say it was for his kids' sake that S stayed in a marriage to their mom and his high school sweetheart Laura that had long been rocky. He was desperately trying to make Laura happy, recalls William Nicholas. The S next door neighbor in Claremont, Florida, Michael was working hard building her a barn. He was even digging his hole in the backyard to make her a duck pond. What S didn't know was that he was literally digging his own grave. On March 9th, 2018, about a month after police say Laura turned them away for attempting to conduct a welfare check request by a friend of Michael's, the Lake Community Sheriff Office searched the S5-acre property and found Michael's skeleton remains in the backyard, buried 3 feet beneath a concrete slab, which had been poured over the unfinished duck pond. Police say S33 was shot once in the back of the head with 38 CL handgun. Several months to several years before his body, still dressed in socks, shorts, and underwear, was found wrapped in a fitted sheet. Several months to several years. I'm not really sure how that works. Was found, more than 2 years later, on September 17, 2020, police arrest Laura, 39, and charged her with second-degree murder. She's pleaded not guilty and is free on bond, awaiting trial. Police allege Laura killed Michael in November 2015 and told friends and family that he had disappeared abandoning her and the kids. On December 30th, 2016, she married Travis Filmer in the backyard of the family home, just 5 feet from the spot where Michael was found buried. And when police noted that Laura and Travis' names were etched in the concrete, the wedding ceremony, and then later hearing she was walking right over the top of him. I mean, that's just really something else, said Nicholas Moore. Shocking, yet friends say, is how she let Michael's kids believe he had abandoned them. That was the worst part of that. The kids have lived half their lives thinking he left, said Rippey. He would never do that. No one disputes that the S marriage was trouble. Michael was arrested in 2014 for simple domestic battery after a confrontation with Laura allegedly struck him over the head with a gun, a .38, but police arrested him for allegedly pulling out the weapon first. Michael would often go quiet for extended periods when he and Laura had a fight, which is one reason his friends weren't alarmed when he disappeared in 2015. When things were really bad with her, which they were a lot, he did withdraw, Rippey said. Another reason no one reported Michael missing for so long, police say that after he was gone, friends and relatives continued receiving messages from his Facebook account, which was updated on occasion. Weeks after his death, authorities allege Laura started selling S gun and giving away his expensive tools. I don't know how to pronounce that word. My son asked Laura how to borrow some kind of tool, and she opened the shed, Nicholas said. He says, "Are you sure Mike doesn't mind if I borrow this?" She goes, "Oh no, he's not going to care. He's never going to be back." Jeffrey Lakes, Laura's attorney, tells people that the state's evidence is largely circumstantial and says his client is not only innocent, but also an abused woman. Nothing S24 arrest Laura Michaels wouldn't talk to people, but in March 2021, she declared her innocence in an online fundraising video. "I'm not guilty," she insists, adding that she's a servant of God who would never cause any harm to the father of my children. Michael's friends aren't so sure. For one thing, she and Michael never got divorced, so her marriage to Fillmore, with whom she now has 2 more children in 2016, is strange. "When I learned Mike was dead, I thought she actually did it," said Nicholas. "I was mad at myself because I didn't encourage him enough to leave her. But with the kids always foremost in his mind, he might not have listened. He would also be the first one to help someone in need," says Michael's sister, Stacy Turner. "I think of all the memories I have of him and how much I wish he were here still." Husband murder, a wife accused. I can't imagine anyone saying a bad word about Mike. A friend of Michael Shaver. 3 years after he went missing, authorities used ground potential radar and excursion to locate his body under a slab of concrete in his backyard. Police say his wife, Laura Fillmore, was the last person to see her husband alive. And welcome back. I am your host, Susanna May O'Hagan, and today we're going to talk about another true crime. My mother made me kill her abuser. Okay, I swear we already talked about this in another case, so we might just skip over this one. At age 11, Mary Belly was given a gun and forced to shoot her violent stepfather, who she held and found forgiveness. In news footage now more than 3 decades old, a little girl is sitting at the living room floor in her ramshackle West Virginia home, the very spot where just hours later, on February 24th, 1987, she had fatally shot her stepfather, Wayne Wyers. Asked by a local reporter on camera why she did it, 11-year-old Mary Elizabeth Bailey, her flaming red hair tucked behind her ear, nods towards an easy chair out of view. Wayne had beat up my mom. He got drunk and he passed out there in the chair, and she paused, shifting uneasily. I shot him. In that unforgettable pause, Mary Bailey held a secret. I did exactly what my mother asked me to do, she says, but she did not take the blame. I thought that I was doing the right thing. The murder that winter's night in the foothills of and Appalachians sent her mother Priscilla to prison for a decade and Bailey into foster care. Now grown, Bailey, 47, has made peace with her past and forgiven her mother. I live with the memory, but I have a good life now, she says. I'm happy, I'm not angry, but I do remember where I came from. Born just after her mother, Priscilla, turned 17, her father was an older married man, not involved in their lives. Bailey grew up in rural West Virginia in sheer poverty, she says. There was never enough food in the house. I was very, very thin. She carried her books to school in a black trash bag because she didn't have... Okay. Daughter's anguish. I didn't want anyone to know what had happened to me or judge me, says Bailey, visiting Mom Priscilla in prison after shooting stepfather Wayne Wyers. Finding peace. The tragedy is part of me, but to be the best person I can be, I can't get caught up thinking about the bad. Bailey says I have to make the best of it. Backpack and barely had money to buy lunch at school. Kids made fun of me all the time. It was awful. Worse still was the life at home with my stepfather, whom Priscilla had married when Bailey was 4. A heavy drinker, Wayne would hurl belts and insults at Bailey and her 3 younger half-siblings. He called me a redhead bee so often I didn't think he knew my name. She says her mother never protected her, as Priscilla herself was abused by Wayne. Sometimes he would beat her until she couldn't even lift her arm up. She was so sore, Bailey said. It was like a house of horrors. The abuse came to a head one fateful week in February 1987. Wayne, then 29 and working as a truck driver, had come home. Okay, I have to go. Hope you all have a great... I'll be back.